The finest military minds of Western Europe stood on the valley floor of Dien Bien Phu, looked up at the towering, jungle-choked peaks surrounding them, and smiled because they believed they had set the perfect trap. They possessed heavy artillery, American-supplied fighter bombers, modern tanks, and elite paratroopers trained in the crucible of World War II. Yet within 55 days, this multi-million-dollar fortress would become a mass grave for colonial ambition. How did an army of barefoot peasants carrying disassembled howitzers on their backs over trackless mountains utterly dismantle a global superpower's military machine? The answer is not found in a simple story of courage, but in a brutal, cold-blooded masterclass of logistics, strategic deception, and a fatal miscalculation of human limits. For decades, Western military doctrine assumed that technology and firepower were the ultimate arbiters of modern conflict. But in the remote highlands of northwestern Vietnam, a quiet Vietnamese mathematics teacher turned general proved that the laws of physics and human will could rewrite the rules of engagement. The French High Command, led by the aristocratic general Henri Navarre, did not just lose a battle, they walked voluntarily into a strategic prison of their own design, blind to the reality that their absolute weapon superiority was useless in a war where the battlefield itself had been re-engineered by their enemy. This is the story of how the French military, armed with the best weapons Western wealth could buy, was systematically suffocated by an opponent they dismissed as incapable of modern warfare. It is a narrative of hubris versus meticulous planning, where every French assumption about distance, weight, and human endurance was systematically shattered by a silent, invisible army that did the impossible. To understand why France lost, we must look past the smoke of the battlefield and examine the profound intellectual failure of an empire that forgot that weapons are only as effective as the strategic framework in which they are deployed. The French army believed they were inviting the Viet Minh to a turkey shoot, where superior French artillery and air support would obliterate any conventional attack. Instead, they had built their own slaughterhouse, isolated from help, surrounded by high ground they had conceded to the enemy without a fight, and dependent on a single, vulnerable airstrip that would soon be torn to pieces by invisible guns. They believed their technology made them invincible, but they were about to learn that in the crucible of total war, strategic imagination is far more lethal than raw firepower. By late 1953, the First Indochina War had dragged on for 7 exhausting years, draining French treasury reserves and fracturing domestic political support in Paris. The newly appointed French commander, General Henri Navarre, realized that a conventional military victory was impossible against a highly mobile guerrilla force that refused to fight on French terms. Navarre formulated a bold new strategy, known as the Navarre Plan, designed to create a powerful, mobile striking force that would seek out and destroy the main Viet Minh divisions in a decisive, set-piece battle. To draw the elusive Viet Minh regular divisions under General Nguyen Giap into the open, Navarre decided to establish a massive airland base in the remote valley of Dien Bien Phu, located in the rugged highlands of northwestern Vietnam near the Laotian border. This valley was strategically positioned to block Viet Minh infiltration routes into Laos, a key French ally, and to serve as a launching pad for offensive operations deep behind enemy lines. The French plan relied heavily on the concept of the Hedgehog defense, a network of fortified strongpoints mutually supporting one another with devastating coordinated firepower. The French believed that their absolute superiority in heavy artillery, tanks, and close air support would easily crush any massed infantry assault. Furthermore, French military intelligence confidently asserted that the Viet Minh could never bring heavy artillery into the surrounding mountains, because the terrain was too steep, the jungle too dense, and the supply lines too long to support such heavy equipment. Colonel Charles de Castries, an aristocratic cavalry officer with a reputation for bravery, was given command of the garrison, which eventually swelled to over 15,000 elite troops, including paratroopers, French foreign legionnaires, and colonial units. De Castries and his staff were so confident of their defensive position that they did not even bother to heavily fortify their bunkers, believing that no enemy force could ever threaten them. They named the strongpoints after women: Beatrice, Gabrielle, Anne-Marie, Dominique, Eliane, Huguette, Claudine, and Isabelle, rumored by the troops to be the names of de Castries' former mistresses. This light-hearted confidence masked a fatal strategic blindness. The French had placed themselves at the bottom of a bowl, completely surrounded by high ground, relying on a logistical lifeline that depended entirely on weather-dependent aerial resupply. While the French garrison settled into their valley fortress, General von Nguyen Giap was orchestrating a logistical miracle that defied every law of conventional Western military science. Giap understood that the French had made a fatal geographic assumption. They believed the surrounding mountains were impassable barriers that would protect the garrison's flanks. Giap turned this assumption on its head by transforming the entire population of the region into a massive, unstoppable logistical engine. Under the banner of the Dan Cong, or civilian laborers, over 250,000 Vietnamese men and women mobilized to support the front lines, creating a human supply chain that stretched for hundreds of kilometers through the trackless jungle. They utilized modified Peugeot bicycles, reinforced with bamboo poles and metal struts, to transport up to 300 kilograms of food, ammunition, and medical supplies per vehicle over steep mountain passes. More astoundingly, Giap's forces dismantled heavy, Soviet-supplied and American-captured 105mm howitzers and 37mm anti-aircraft guns, dragging the individual components by hand up vertical mud cliffs using ropes, pulleys, and raw human muscle. The French Air Force, flying high-altitude reconnaissance missions, looked down at the dense jungle canopy and saw nothing, completely unaware that the Viet Minh were digging deep, reinforced artillery emplacements directly into the forward slopes of the mountains overlooking the valley. These guns were meticulously camouflaged with living vegetation, making them completely invisible from the air. When French pilots did spot movement, their napalm strikes were useless against the deep subterranean tunnels the Vietnamese had carved into the mountainsides. By early March 1954, Giap had successfully positioned over 200 artillery pieces and tens of thousands of elite combat troops on the high ground surrounding Dien Bien Phu, completely encircling the unsuspecting French garrison. The French had prepared for a battle against a lightly armed guerrilla force, but Giap had assembled a highly disciplined conventional army equipped with devastating firepower. The trap was set, but it was not the French who would be doing the hunting, as the French commanders remained blissfully unaware that their entire defensive concept was already obsolete before the first shot was fired. At exactly 5:10 in the afternoon on March 13, 1954, the silence of the valley was shattered by a deafening roar that the French commanders believed was physically impossible. A relentless torrent of heavy artillery shells began raining down on Strongpoint Beatrice, one of the key northern bastions defending the French airstrip. Within minutes, the French fortifications, which had not been built to withstand heavy bombardment, were reduced to splinters and dust. The French artillery commander, Colonel Charles Pirot, who had previously boasted to his superiors that he could silence any enemy gun within 5 minutes of its first shot, watched in absolute horror as his own counter-battery fire struck empty jungle, while the Viet Minh shells continued to fall with devastating precision. Pirot realized that the Viet Minh guns were buried deep inside the mountain faces, firing from protected tunnels that French artillery could never reach. Overwhelmed by guilt and the realization that his professional hubris had doomed his men, Pirot went into his bunker that night, pulled the pin on a hand grenade, and committed suicide. Within 48 hours, both Beatrice and Gabrielle, the two most critical northern outposts, had fallen to waves of disciplined Viet Minh infantry who advanced under the cover of their devastating artillery. The French airstrip, the sole lifeline for supplies, reinforcements, and medical evacuations, was quickly brought under direct observed artillery fire, rendering it completely unusable. French aircraft attempting to drop supplies were forced to fly at dangerously high altitudes to escape the unexpected network of Viet Minh anti-aircraft guns, causing thousands of tons of vital ammunition, food, and medicine to drift directly into enemy hands. The elite French paratroopers, once confident of their superiority, found themselves trapped in a muddy, blood-soaked bowl, subjected to a continuous, nightmarish bombardment that they could neither escape nor return. They realized too late that they were no longer the hunters but the prey, caught in a vice that was tightening with every passing hour. As the weeks dragged into April, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu transformed into a grueling, claustrophobic war of attrition that closely resembled the horrors of the Western Front in World War I. General Giap, eager to minimize infantry casualties after the bloody opening assaults, ordered his troops to dig hundreds of kilometers of trenches that slowly snaked their way across the valley floor, creeping closer and closer to the remaining French strongpoints. These trenches allowed Viet Minh assault teams to bypass the open, fire-swept zones and launch sudden, devastating attacks directly on the French perimeters. The arrival of the annual monsoon rains turned the entire valley into a toxic swamp of thick, red mud, filling the trenches with water and collapsing the makeshift French bunkers. The French field hospital, dug deep underground, became a subterranean hell of mud, gangrene, and amputated limbs, with doctors operating continuously under the dim light of flashlights while artillery shells shook the earth above. In Washington, the Eisenhower administration debated launching Operation Vulture, a massive airstrike involving American B-29 bombers, and even considered the use of tactical nuclear weapons to relieve the French garrison. But political hesitation and British opposition ultimately killed the plan. Left entirely to their fate, the French defenders fought with desperate bravery, launching counterattacks to reclaim lost strongpoints, but their numbers were relentlessly depleted by continuous attrition. By early May, the French perimeter had shrunk to an area barely larger than a few football fields, and the remaining defenders were exhausted, starving, and nearly out of ammunition. On May 7, 1954, after 55 days of relentless combat, General Giap ordered a massive, all-out assault across the entire valley, and at 5:30 that evening, the red, gold-starred flag of the Viet Minh was raised over Colonel de Castries' command bunker, signaling the end of the battle. Over 10,000 French soldiers marched into captivity, a visual testament to the fall of an empire. The catastrophic defeat of the French army at Dien Bien Phu remains one of the most profound military lessons of the modern era, demonstrating that absolute technological and weapon superiority is meaningless when divorced from strategic reality. The French High Command fell victim to a systemic intellectual failure, analyzing the conflict through a narrow, Eurocentric lens of conventional warfare that assumed their opponent was bound by the same technological and logistical limitations as themselves. They treated logistics as a mathematical calculation of road networks and tonnage, completely failing to understand that a mobilized, highly motivated civilian population could bypass conventional infrastructure entirely through sheer human effort. General Giap's victory was not achieved by rejecting modern military science, but by masterfully adapting it to the unique physical and political geography of Vietnam, transforming every apparent disadvantage into a strategic strength. The French believed they were fighting a localized military campaign, whereas the Viet Minh were engaged in a total, multi-dimensional war of national liberation, where military actions were perfectly synchronized with political mobilization and international diplomacy. This battle proved that in a conflict between a high-tech expeditionary force and a deeply rooted popular movement, the side that can endure the greatest hardship and adapt most rapidly to the physical environment will ultimately prevail. Technology can multiply force, but it cannot create a coherent strategy, nor can it compensate for a fundamental misunderstanding of the enemy's will and capacity. The ruins of the French bunkers in the Dien Bien Phu Valley stand as a permanent monument to the dangers of military hubris, reminding modern strategists that the human element, strategic adaptability and logistical resilience remain the true decisive factors in warfare. When a military relies solely on its technological edge while ignoring the socio-political dimension of war, it prepares itself not for victory, but for a highly sophisticated defeat. The geopolitical shockwaves of May 7, 1954, reverberated far beyond the muddy trenches of the Tonkin Hills, instantly transforming the global balance of power and rewriting the rules of modern warfare. In Geneva, where international diplomats had gathered to negotiate an end to the hostilities in Indochina, the news of the fortress's surrender arrived like a thunderclap. It shattered French negotiating leverage overnight, forcing the Laniel government to collapse and compelling the Western powers to confront a stark new reality. The resulting Geneva Accords ended nearly a century of French colonial rule in Indochina, temporarily dividing Vietnam at the 17th parallel and setting the stage for a fragile, highly volatile peace. But the true legacy of Dien Bien Phu was not merely the redrawing of administrative borders, it was the psychological demolition of colonial invincibility. For centuries, European empires had maintained their global dominance through the implicit promise of overwhelming technological and military superiority. Dien Bien Phu shattered this illusion permanently. It proved to colonized peoples worldwide that a highly organized, deeply committed indigenous force, fueled by national resolve, could outmaneuver, outfight, and decisively defeat a modern Western army in a conventional, set-piece battle. Within months of the French surrender, nationalist movements across the globe drew direct inspiration from the Vietnamese victory. Most notably, in French Algeria, revolutionary leaders launched their own war of independence in late 1954, explicitly citing the tactics, logistics, and resilience of the Viet Minh as their primary strategic blueprint. The fall of the Valley Fortress signaled the twilight of the old European colonial empires, accelerating the unstoppable wave of decolonization that swept across Africa and Asia in the mid-20th century. Yet, even as the French packed their bags and departed, the tragic cycle of conflict in Vietnam was far from over. In Washington, policymakers viewed the French defeat not as a lesson in the limits of military technology against a popular nationalist movement, but as a dangerous vacuum that needed to be filled to contain the spread of global communism. Having financed up to 80% of the French war effort in its final years, the United States gradually stepped into the geopolitical void, convinced that American resources, superior technology, and managerial efficiency could succeed where French colonial forces had failed. By ignoring the fundamental lesson of Dien Bien Phu, that military power is ultimately ineffective when divorced from local political legitimacy and popular support, the United States began its own slow, painful slide into a protracted, agonizing conflict. Ultimately, the battle was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare that redefined the curriculum of military academies worldwide. It demonstrated that a nation's defense cannot rely solely on the sophistication of its weaponry, the control of the skies, or the depth of its treasury. True strategic strength lies in the alignment of military objectives with the collective will of the population, the capacity for rapid tactical adaptation under fire, and an unyielding willingness to endure unimaginable hardship for a sovereign future. Decades later, the silent, rusted artillery pieces and overgrown trenches of the Dien Bien Phu Valley remain a stark warning to any military power that mistakes technological dominance for strategic invincibility, reminding us that the human spirit and strategic adaptability remain the ultimate arbiters of victory. The echoes of the guns at Dien Bien Phu did not just mark the end of the French Empire in Indochina. They signaled a seismic shift in the global balance of power, proving to colonized nations worldwide that even the most formidable Western military machines could be defeated through strategic brilliance and national resolve. As we analyze this turning point in modern history, we must ask ourselves, how often do modern military powers still fall into the very same trap of technological hubris that doomed the French garrison in 1954? The lessons of this remote valley continue to resonate in contemporary conflicts, where high-tech armies frequently struggle against decentralized, highly resilient adversaries who understand that the battlefield is defined by more than just firepower. If you want to explore the deep strategic maneuvers, the hidden human stories, and the geopolitical consequences that shape the modern world, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We are dedicated to bringing you historically accurate, deeply researched, and balanced narratives of Vietnamese history that challenge conventional perspectives. What do you think was the single biggest mistake the French made at Dien Bien Phu? And do you see similar strategic miscalculations happening in modern conflicts today? Share your thoughts and analysis in the comments section below, as we love engaging in deep, respectful historical debates with our community. In our next episode, we will dive into the intense diplomatic chess match of the Geneva Accords, where the map of Vietnam was redrawn, and the seeds of an even larger global conflict were planted. Thank you for watching, and stay curious as we continue to uncover the complex, fascinating history of Vietnam. Your support through likes, shares, and comments helps us keep history alive and accessible to a global audience, proving that the stories of the past are still deeply relevant to understanding our present.